Welcome back. Today we're starting chapter 2. In this chapter, it's mostly about the very first thing people think of when they are asked about geography: maps. Actually, before we really get into the maps, we need to define what geography really is, which is where the chapter starts. Today, we'll talk about the definition of geography, where the word comes from, and talk about the different branches of geography. We'll also spend some time going over the 5 themes of geography. So let's get started. The world is a huge place. It's just gotten smaller over the last century. I'm sure you're wondering what in the world I mean by that. Well, about 150 years ago, if you wanted to travel to California from anywhere on the East Coast, it would take you about 4 to 5 months if you went by boat down around the southern tip of South America and up the West Coast to San Francisco. And it would take you about 4 to 6 months if you went by wagon train. That's 4 to 6 months from St. Louis. Add more time if you wanted to count the trip from the East Coast to St. Louis. The settlers had to time it just right, or they would get stuck in the Rockies or the Sierras during the first snow. When that happened, there were disastrous consequences. The Donner Party, which was caught in the Sierra Mountains, allegedly was forced to survive by practicing cannibalism. No, the world was a huge place. Recently, I traveled to California from South Carolina. I took a non-stop flight to San Francisco, and it took about 5.5 hours. Not months, weeks, or even days. Just 5.5 hours. I didn't even miss a meal. Yep, the world has definitely gotten smaller, figuratively. It's just as big, it just doesn't take as long to travel it. This changes everything for us. I dare say most of you will travel the world either for ministry or tourism. So studying geography is important. The book says on page 13, geography is the study that helps people make sense of the world and make use of it. So what does that mean exactly? Well, people have to use the resources given in their area of the world. I like this phrase, where you live affects how you live. Imagine if your dad or mom was transferred to another state or country. Wouldn't you immediately look up everything you could about that place to know what your family was getting into? You don't want to show up in Miami with sweaters and snow pants with skis, right? Or you don't want to take your fishing pole to Death Valley, California. You're going to dress appropriately, eat appropriately, and try not to offend. Think about where you live. How does where you live affect how you live? Do you need air conditioning? Do you have clean water? Do you live near the shore so that you eat a lot of seafood? Think about it. See how where you live affects how you live? So what is the definition of geography? Well, there really isn't an easy answer. It's a combination of things. Like the word geography comes from 2 root meanings, earth, geo, and written description, graphy. The book says, a description of humanity's God-given abode and everything and everyone on it, and how people interact with it and on it in fulfilling their God-given role as stewards of God's creation. Okay, that was a mouthful. But just understand, it's really the study of where things happen throughout our history. History is the study of events in time, and geography is the study of spaces and places. History's main tool is a timeline. Geography's main tool is a map. Spaces and places. Okay, let's look back to the example I used earlier. The Donner Party. In 1846, 87 people set out to try and make it from Fort Bridger in Wyoming to Sutter's Fort in California. They decided to try and take a supposed shortcut through Utah, but alas, it actually added time to their trip. On the maps available, it looked like a straight shot and would take miles off the trip. But if the Donner Party would have looked at a relief map, they would have realized that it was definitely not shorter or easier on the women and children. They were given wrong geographic information. The delay caused them to enter the Sierra Mountains too far into the fall. Winter can come very early in the Sierra Mountains, and that is exactly what happened. Instead of being at Sutter's Fort by the 1st of October, which was the ideal date, they didn't even attempt to cross until October 20th. Part of the disaster was caused by faulty information about geography and weather patterns. In looking at this historic event, you have to study the geography, the space and place where it happened, to understand what happened. So there are two main branches in the study of geography. There is the study of physical geography and the study of human geography. Let's look at physical geography first. Physical geography is the study of the earth and its resources. It deals with where things are located, like boundaries on a map, where rivers are located, how tall a mountain is. Those are all issues that are physical geography. We'll talk about physical geography in the first unit of this book. The second main branch of geography is human geography, which is the study of man as he lives on the earth and uses its resources. This is the part where you study the concept of where you live affects how you live. Human geography will be discussed in the second unit in this book, The World as Man Subdues It. Now, these two branches are divided into dozens of smaller branches. Now, as you study these two main branches, there are two ways you can study them: systematically or regionally. Systematic geography looks at one branch of geography at a time, using different regions of the world as examples. In other words, it might look at major rivers of the world using the Nile, the Amazon, and the Mississippi as just a few that are being studied. Regional geography looks at only one region of the world at a time. So when we study South America in Chapter 10, we will be looking at all of the different countries, the mountains, the climate, their cities, all of their resources, pretty much everything about that area. You'll know so much that it will be like you lived there. Okay, maybe not, but you get the picture. Chapter 2 through 5 studies geography systematically, and chapters 6 through 24 studies it regionally. Okay, so let's go on and talk about the themes of geography. The study of geography has 5 fundamental themes. They are location, place, interaction, movement, and region. Now, location can be a specific or an absolute location, like an address or a specific longitude and latitude, or it can be a relative location, like the city of Atlanta is located in the northeastern part of the state of Georgia. Place would include both the physical and human characteristics of an area. In other words, it would include the rivers and the mountains, but it would also include the bridges over the rivers and the buildings located in the cities. We used Atlanta as an example of location. Let's continue with Atlanta. Using place, you would study not only that Atlanta was one of the highest elevations of any of the cities east of the Mississippi, but you would also learn that both 75 and 85 major highways going north and south intersect through Atlanta. Interaction refers to how people interact with and respond to each other and their environment. It's actually the very heart of human geography. What happens when a natural disaster happens? Do people come together, or is it every man for himself? What about when a baseball or football team wins the national championship? Do the people riot? There are cities that interact that way. Seems strange, doesn't it? Hey, our team just won the Super Bowl. Let's trash our town. Makes no sense. But I digress. These themes include how people, goods, ideas, diseases, and other things move from one location to another. Places like China and Japan historically isolated themselves from other countries. They didn't want to share ideas. They didn't want to trade. But both countries were cut off from other civilizations because of natural boundaries. Both were just using their natural boundaries to promote their isolationist views. China had mountains, deserts, and oceans that isolated them. Japan is an island. The ocean was their natural boundary. Region is defined by formal boundaries, functions, and languages. Some boundaries can be natural and others are political. The regions of the United States end with the natural boundary of the Rio Grande River between Texas and Mexico. But then there are political boundaries that aren't so exact. Both countries have to agree to honor those political boundaries. There have been wars that have been fought over those boundaries. And the boundaries aren't just natural or political. They can be set by languages too. In the days that led up to World War II, there were German-speaking people that Adolf Hitler felt that he was liberating when he invaded the Sudetenland and Austria. Remember these different themes as we embark on this study of geography. You'll see them over and over again. So, let's do a quick review of what we learned today. We talked about the definition of geography and where the word came from. Earth meaning geo and written description, graphy. We also talked about the two major branches of geography, physical and human geography, and how each of those two branches can be studied either systematically or regionally. We also talked about the themes of geography. There's location, place, interaction, movement, and region. Now, in our next lesson, we will be talking about the history of geography. I could get lost talking about that one. See you next time.